before that you can add to your library of ideas. Stay with us. You're going to have a wonderful time. I'm glad you could join me here again on another Yarnell School of Fine Art. Boy, we are going to have a great time in this session. We're going to learn a bunch of things that you haven't learned before. And in fact, we're not even going to paint a painting. And you're going to say, well, how am I going to learn if I don't do a painting? Well, frankly, folks, any artist that's ever painted, really truly learn it the right way. You don't really learn by painting a painting. You learn by doing segments of paintings. Now, I've had cards and letters and calls from people all over this country in different parts of the world wanting to learn how to do specific things. And one of the things that I want to do in this session is take a canvas, which is this one. This is an 18 by 24, and I'm going to divide it into segments. Now, in the art world, we call these thumbnail sketches. Whenever I'm struggling with something or wanting to learn something brand new, instead of trying to make a whole painting and get frustrated with it, I just do my thumbnail sketches or thumbnail paintings. So, for instance, in this segment, we may learn, I think we're going to just learn how to do cloud formations, maybe some distant hills. Over here, I'm going to teach you how to do just leafy trees and how to use the script brush. Down here, we may just learn how to do rock formations. Over here, we may learn how to do maybe a different kind of tree or maybe water and reflections. Okay? So basically, what this is going to boil down to is just simply segments. And I guarantee you, if you'll learn to do that, when you start to do a whole painting, it clicks a whole lot easier. All right? Once again, I know many of you have been following the show for many, many years, and perhaps you've seen it in your area or other areas, or you've had some tapes. Well, the palette's the same. Nothing changes, but I'm going to quickly lay it out to you here just so you'll have an idea. And we're going to use just gesso. I'll get it up here where they can see it. This is gesso. It's not the white paint. It's the liquid, but it's kind of thick. That's what we use for our white. So when you hear me say white, that's what we're using. We have cadmium yellow light, cadmium orange. We have the cadmium red light. Over here in the corner, we have the Hooker's green. We have the burnt sienna, the ultramarine blue. We have the dioxazine purple. We have the burnt umber. And then over here, we have an optional color, which is phthalo yellow green. You can see it's a real bright yellowish green. Occasionally, we'll use alizarin crimson. But today, we're just going to stick with that. Our same basic brushes we always use. I've added a few more here. Of course, you will need the Hake brush, which is a big, wide brush here. I've got one, a newer one here. You can see it's got the big, wide bristles. This is one that was developed just for me, so it'll work a little better. But that's a good brush, and it's really nice to work for skies. All right, now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to blend the sky, and then we'll learn how to lay in a little distant hill or mountain, but mostly how to do skies first. So now let's take the Hake brush, and I wet it, and I put a little water on the canvas. And by the way, this is an old canvas. You can see by looking at it that I just gessoed over just for the purpose that I'm showing you. I just painted on it to learn techniques, and instead of throwing the canvas away or wasting it, I just gesso over it and let it dry, and it's like a new canvas again. All right, now I wet that, and then I take the gesso, and I just put a nice coating of gesso on this whole thing. All right, now, if you're joining us for the very first time, say this is the first time you've watched a session, and you're interested in learning more about the materials we use, don't hesitate to give us a call, drop us a note, or we'll get the information to you somehow so that you can join us as well, because nothing is exciting as painting. It's great therapy, wonderful to just kind of pass the time, good rainy day project. And of course, there are some of you that are wanting to be professionals and aspire to do that. Well, my job is to teach you. Now, after you've done this, then there's one thing you're going to do. Now, this is a great study in blending. Now, take your brush while that's still wet. By the way, if it starts to get too dry, and under these hot lights in the studio it dries, if you'll take your mister bottle and get way back and lightly mist it, you can do that. And that keeps the paint moist so that you can keep blending. So see, I need to just kind of skim it with your brush. Now I'm going to start at the horizon here with a little bit of red on one corner and a little touch of purple on the other corner. See, that's called double loading. See, I've got a touch of color on each end. That'll be our horizon color. And I strip that across the base. And I use a great big X like this. Big X's. See? It's a beautiful color. Just beautiful. One of my favorite colors. Now, see how I blended that and I feather ever so gently? Just, you can't see any brush strokes. Although a brush stroke or two won't matter, this is how easy it is to blend. You can almost make it look like an airbrush. Then you just take a little bit of ultramarine blue now at the very top and a little bit of burnt sienna, which will be just a touch. And you put a strip of this across the top. Go back and use your brush like this. Now I've got a little glare here. I'm going to try to adjust this just a little bit so I can see this. And I'm going to pull that forward. Yeah, that's better. Now I'm going to put a little more blue at the top. Yeah, they go back with big X's. Now here's where most of us get in trouble. When you're blending two colors together, it's always important to use what we call a feather stroke. Now, you just use a light stroke, a little heavier at first, and then as you start coming down into the other color, see how I'm just barely skimming the surface, just gently touching it, like this. Now, see how beautiful that is? That just creates a magnificent background color. Just incredible for creating, any kind of a look you want, from a snow scene to a, maybe a portrait for birds or animals or whatever it is you're doing. Okay, that's a really nice thing. Now, while this is sort of wet still, we're going to put our first little layer of mountains in here. And then while this is drying, we're going to go block in the other background. And then while that's drying, we'll come back and put our study in here. So each one of these will have a blended background, so it'll be a good thing for you to learn how to blend different backgrounds. Now, while that's still wet and you have your large hake brush in your hand, just take a little bit of blue. Now, this is important right down here. So you see I'm taking the ultramarine blue, a little bit of the burnt sienna, and I'm going to put a little purple in there. I love purple, as you know, and you want it to be fairly dark. And just kind of put a layer of sort of distant hills like this. Now remember, folks, we are not doing a finished painting. We are only doing studies to help you understand a specific problem that you may be struggling with. Now, I know that everyone's different. You may have blending down just perfectly well and you don't have to worry about it, but you may struggle when we get to rock. So this will be a great opportunity for you to build your reference library of studies. Now just get a nice, interesting shape. Yes. See, I'm kind of gently blending. See, that's neat about these brushes is the hairs on them, see how they bend? You can create all kinds of interesting shapes with them. Okay. That's all you have to do there. That gets that first little hillside. See how hazy and misty? That's so beautiful. Now, while this one's drying, let's go over here to this segment, and we're going to paint that a solid color. It's not going to be blended to create a sky. It's going to be a background for trees only. So we're just going to paint it solid, but you have to use the same technique. So now let's rinse our brush out real good. And wet the canvas with a little bit of water here. Then you take the gesso and just put a nice coating of gesso, but notice how I just kind of evenly distribute this all the way across. Now, in this particular case, it's not going to matter what color you use. You can use your own color, as long as it's a muddled grayish tone. In other words, it could have more green in it. For instance, I'm going to use a little green, a little burnt sienna, and a little bit of blue. I've got all three of those colors on my brush, and I'm just going to blob them in like this. Now, this is a good technique for learning. For instance, if you are going to do birds and animals, I do lots of birds and animals, some of my favorite things to paint, as most of you know. And this is how you blend a perfectly smooth background without blending two colors together. That's the difference between this one and this one. Here, you're putting all your colors up here, and you blend them together on your canvas until you create a nice, soft, monotone background. See, isn't that beautiful? As long as it's got some color, doesn't have to be really perfect. Now, like I said, every one of these are going to have a background. So we'll continue, because I don't think this is quite dry enough yet. So let's scoot on over here. And do this one here. Now, you're going to do it just like that one, but you're going to do a different color. So this will be a good test for you to see how well you're blending now. Okay, now here again, I'm going to just wet this with, I started to say wet water. Well, water is wet, but go ahead, just put that on, and notice it's dirty. That's just fine. For what we're doing, you just need a nice background. Now, I wasn't going to show you this when I started this show. I was going to have these pre-done, but I decided that as we learn things, blending is probably one of the biggest battles people face. So I wanted to show you how to blend. Now watch what we're going to do with this one. Come down here. Well, first, always start with gesso. Let's kind of quickly get a little layer of gesso on here. Move it around good. And then we'll go back to each segment individually and put our subjects in. But this is a great way to learn to blend different colors. Now, what I'm going to do is take a real strong orange, like this, at the base. Work your way up. Now, here's a color scheme that a lot of you will panic when you hear this, but I want you to take orange again on your brush on one corner, and then purple on the other corner. Now, this creates a beautiful background for, especially if you like fall colors. Now, I've done a lot of fall scenes, and this is one of my favorite color schemes. But just start at the top, work it down. Now, see, when you're first putting it on, there's no particular stroke. But now these brushes need a little maintenance. So when you put it like that, see, it kind of flattens out the bristles again. Now, see, remember, when you come down and blend the two together, just feather them. Feather them. See how nice that comes? Isn't that beautiful? So now we've got 3 colors, and we're almost to the last one here, and then we'll have all of our segments underpainted. Then we can start back and do the subjects. Now this one, I want you to just have fun with. do it however you want it. Now here I'm going to just take my dirty brush and just water right now. And then what I'm going to do with the dirty brush, I'm going to add some gesso to this after I get this wet. Now see, that's a transparent wash. That's kind of like a glaze, what you would call glazing. And I'm going to paint this one with more blue in it. Now I'm going to take gesso right on top of that. Now I prefer to use the dirty brush. As you, most of you know that have been following for many years, I like a dirty palette and a dirty brush to create the softer, subdued colors. Now I'm not saying that's the only way to paint. It's not, but it works for me and I'm happy with it. And it seems to work for most people. Because we all struggle getting our paintings soft. We usually get them too gaudy and overpowering and so forth. Now you see you've got a nice soft background color, but I want to give it some color now. I'm going to just use pure blue, and I'm going to start in the middle like this, and I'm just going to blend the blue out. And see, practicing, what's good about doing this is you get to practice this X stroke. And I'm going to show you something that so many beginners do wrong. They get the color on okay, but then they just streak it back and forth like this. Now all that does is streak it. When you blend it and you want a professional look, use X's, okay? Use big X's. That's the blending stroke that works. Don't just use a horizontal stroke, because that'll get you in trouble every time, okay? So now you have the backgrounds done. You've got 4 different ones. Looking real good, okay? Excellent. I can't see what you're doing, but I just have a feeling it's good. Now when you get trash, just trash in your painting like I did there, you can pick it out with your brush sometimes or fingernail or whatever, as long as it's still wet, and clean it right up. Okay, now see, we got 4 backgrounds to do our studies on now, so we're right on time to go ahead and start back with square number 1. Okay? And this is not a game show, so it's no surprise what's under square number 1, but we are going to have a little surprise because you don't know what's going to happen exactly, and I do. But right now, it's still just a little sticky, so while it is, I'm going to go ahead and work on this. Now, I want you to watch this really up close because let's go to the palette first, and let's take, let's switch to our number 4 sable. This is a little flat sable brush. Now, I've got 2 different ones here. I'll show you. This one's worn out, so you see there's not much bristle showing. In fact, let me get it up here. If they'll come up here to the canvas again, it'll be good. Okay, see, this is a newer one, and it's got a longer, more refined bristle. This one's kind of worn out. Well, I like to use the more worn out one for this because you get softer edges. This one's okay if you want cleaner details, but this one will put the highlights on a little softer, okay? So now let's lay that one down, and let's go down and mix up our sunshine color, which will be white with a little touch of yellow, which, by the way, the complement to our painting up there, we have quite a bit of purple in there, so, you know, the complement to yellow is, purple is yellow. So we take a little yellow and a little white. Now, you can add a little orange to it as well, which I'm going to do. And I accidentally got a little green in there. Okay. Now let's go back up here to our canvas. Now the light's going to be coming in from the left-hand side here, and all I want you to do in this segment, and it's not a big issue because our main focus is on the clouds, but I want you to put a real thin highlight. Now watch this solid mass of color turn into a beautiful sunlit distant hill or even a distant mountain, okay? Now notice where I'm holding the brush. This is where a lot of you get in trouble. I'm gently touching the canvas, and I'm leaving pockets of space. Notice as I come down, I may go from a thin line to a thicker line, but I just keep moving now. See over here, I switch back around. See, I'm leaving these little pockets of space there. And come across here, all the way down, like this. See, I'm kind of dry brushing. Now, this may not interest some of you that don't have any hills or mountains in your area, but it's a very effective way of learning how to scrub and blend. Maybe there's some other kind of subject where you could use this technique. Remember, painting is about technique. And if you go to any art school, and that's why I'm using this format as an art school, is they're going to teach you things that you may never have an interest in doing. But the key to a good painting is learning all the different things and then applying it to what your favorite thing is. Because even though you may not like mountains or rocks or trees, maybe you're a portrait painter or a still life painter, that's okay. You'll learn something. I'm not a big still life fan, but I've painted quite a few, and I've learned tremendous things from still life painting. And it's helped me in my landscapes. See, I'm going to come down, switch direction. Now I'm going to kind of very carefully pick spots where I want to have the cracks and the crevices be a little bit more dominant. And see how I'm softening and blending everything together very gently? Okay? That's all you have to do. Isn't that beautiful? Stand back and look at it. Remember, the average viewing distance is 6 feet. And if you leave the proper pockets of space and light in there, you're going to have a wonderful, wonderful background, okay? Well, that's how you create a distant mountain. Now, down here at the base, you may have little pine trees or something, which if we have time, we'll put some. If not, it's no big deal. But that's how you get a distant hill. And as you come forward, you just make it a little darker, and then you've got a lot of distance. But now let's go back to the main thing that I was going to show you. And this is really exciting because a lot of times painting clouds are a real challenge to people. Now, all I'm going to do again is show you the technique, and then you can take it and study it. Now, I'm going to switch to a little this is a number 8 bristle brush. And I'm going to kind of clean it out a little bit. I'm going to use pure gesso with a little bit of orange, just a touch. I mean just a slight tint. Just barely touch it. See there, just a slight tint? Now I'm going to do something that's going to scare you, but that's okay. That's kind of my job. Now watch what happens here. I'm going to take this whitish color, and this little orange tint here, and I'm going to do something here. Now most people panic when that happens, okay? I know it looks like a big bird flew over, but that's not what the case is here. This is going to be a cloud. Now watch this. You take that blob of paint, turn your brush sideways, okay? It's real important here. And you begin developing these beautiful white fluffy clouds. Now you see the secret here is to blend the base out so that it kind of creates a shadow by allowing your background to come through in a transparent form. Okay, just kind of gently scrub, and you leave areas that you want to be a little brighter just there. And that's all you have to do, and then you just keep building. Now watch how we build. Say you want the cloud to be a little brighter, you just put it on. Blend it like that. And so this particular segment of your grouping here is your cloud study and your hill study. So you've got two things here that you can practice that are sort of go hand in hand, and do this over and over several times. Now I'm going to do a little more. Just keep watching. And then we'll move over to our other segment. Now say I want to come up here a little higher to create a better composition. You just put the paint in there, and then you dry brush it using the side of the brush. Leave the top of it a lot lighter, and then you fade the bottom part out, see? That's how you create the third dimension. Isn't that exciting? That just creates such a wonderful effect. Now, if I want to create some layered clouds, I can do that too. Just by coming in here like this, putting one a little brighter right here, and just blending it down. You can take your finger if you want to. There's a lot of ways to create this, and just suggest the clouds. And then you just create these beautiful soft arrangements all throughout your sky, understanding that it has to be soft and subtle, and then you're in business, okay? And here you just kind of put little smudges to create the little wispy clouds, you know, if you see drifting across on sort of a windy day. Those don't have any particular form. They're just wisps of clouds, all right? And that's what you do to create all those beautiful effects. Isn't that exciting? That's a wonderful little technique, and it's a great way to learn clouds. Now, let's move over to our other square, and we're moving relatively quick, not so much because of time, but because, remember the 3 Ps, don't piddle, play, or putter, and that's what all of us get into. So you'll see that I paint faster than probably you will, but it's because I know where I'm going, and I want to get there and not mess it up. And once you get a feel for the technique, you will too. You'll be able to do it in good shape. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is get our script brush. Let's go down here to the palette. Now, everyone knows the script brush is this long, bristled one. And you just take some water, a little burnt sienna, a little blue, mix it and create sort of an inky mixture. Just sort of an inky mixture. See, it's real fluid. Roll your brush, nice and fluid, and then roll it out to a point. Now, almost everyone I've ever talked to just can't understand how to make this brush last as long as I can do this with a tree. Well, watch this now. If you get enough paint in there, see, it's like a fountain pen. It's up all loaded, and then as the paint comes out, it drains down towards the tip, so it'll last a long time. Well, this will be a tree study. This will be some dead trees and then a live tree. Start at the bottom, go up. See how we do that? Retrace your steps, and you go up. You go up. Now we create those nice little delicate limbs, holding the brush back towards the end here. You see how I'm doing that? This is everyone's best friend, or it could be your worst enemy, because this little brush is tricky in one sense, but it's got so much flexibility to create beautiful limbs in the other sense, okay? So, see, I've retraced my steps. Notice I go always up and from the inside out. Never go from the outside in. You'll always get a big blob. And always retrace your steps if you can, because then it flows off gracefully and naturally, okay? That's excellent. Okay. Now after we do this one, In just a minute, we're going to come over here and do another one, and I'm going to show you how to leaf that one, okay? We'll reload our brush, just like we did before now, with the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue. Just get a nice inky mixture here. Now this is going to be a tree that's going to have leaves on it, so we're going to learn two things on this panel. Over here we learn the mountains and clouds. Here we're going to learn trees, dead trees and live trees. So over here just make a real quick trunk. It doesn't have to be a main one. Just, I mean a lot of little ones, just one main one like this. And then I'll show you how to leaf it. And we'll add more limbs if we need to. All you need to do is just get a little basic trunk like this, and then we're going to leaf. Now let's go down here and I'll show you how we plan for that. So take your number 10 or number 8 bristle brush, or number 12, depending on how big your tree is, and take this down here. Now the secret is in loading the brush and getting the brush manipulated properly. See how I'm flattening it out there? That scares a lot of people, but this is the fan effect that you want that brush to have, so that when you start doing the leaves, it'll be fluffy. Okay, now we take the Hooker's green, the burnt sienna. I always put a little purple in with my green, and I'll probably add a little white. I like to just sort of soften the color. So you've got the green, the sienna, and a little purple, and a little touch of white. Now come back up to your palette, to your canvas, and if your canvas is bouncing, you can take your finger and push on it, and that'll kind of hold it from moving. And then start just like this. Now first we're going to shape the tree with a dark underpainting, then we're going to highlight it. Okay, now just watch how this develops. This really is exciting. See, I'm just dabbing straight on. I'm going to sort of create an umbrella type effect. I'm going to jump around down here, creating little pockets of space that will suggest the leaves of a tree. Now, this is just the underpainting. We're going to highlight it here in just a second. Now notice how I'm developing little pockets, but I'm leaving space as we go around. That's called negative space. Now, again, if you've been following the show for a while, you probably know what I'm talking about, because I fuss at you all the time about that. But this is really neat. Okay, we'll come right on across. And let's see. See how nice that's shaping up? And just reloading, dabbing straight on. This also gives it a nice texture, which is really good. Now, after you've got your basic shape here, isn't that a beautiful little tree? Then you come down here, you just take a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow on the edge. Now, by the way, this color can change endlessly. There's endless numbers of color combinations. I'm just showing you the technique and how to do it. And then when you get to your painting and you're ready to paint, you can change the color. It could be fall, it could be spring, it could be summer. Now, see, I've got sort of an intermediate green that's a little bit lighter than what we had, and then we'll put the final highlight on. This one, assuming that the light's coming in from the left, now watch how we just gently highlight the outer edge of our leaves. And it's barely touching, but it creates a wonderful softness. It looks so realistic. And it's barely touching the edge. Blend it down into your clump. Don't completely paint the clump out. Now, the biggest mistake most people make is, I don't know if it's because you're just having so much fun you can't stop, or you just aren't sure what you're doing, but most people just paint the whole thing over, and then you lose your depth, okay? See, I'm just touching the edge, and then coming back down into the painting, just gradually. Then all you do is you take pure color now. I'm going to take pure white and a little pure yellow, and that will be our outer highlight. And if you mix a little bit of what's in your brush in there, then it kind of tones it down a little bit. But see, you want this real clean light now, right on the outer edge. And that gives you your sunlit. So you now have three values. You have your dark tone, which was the first layer we put on, which gave the tree its basic form. You have the second layer, which gives it its second dimension. And then you have this layer that gives it the final highlight and gives it the third dimension. And that's what you want, three values to create that third three-dimensional effect. And just barely touching the outer edge just to give it its final form. Isn't that exciting? It's a beautiful little tree there, and it has so much character. And it's airy. You can see through it. Notice the pockets of space that are kind of left. Then you take your script brush, and then you can finish adding the tree limbs. So you just add the limbs to create the finished effect, and then you can, if it was a bigger tree, you would want to highlight it and finish it up. And put some little saplings at the base, and then eventually learn how to grass. In fact, on one of these, we're going to do some grass probably. So, you know, you would just learn how to take a little grass and I'm just going to do this just to kind of help settle it down. Like a little hillside right there, and you just grass that up, and then you've got a beautiful little tree growing there that you could stick anywhere in your paintings. It could be in any setting, any place that you want it to be. So that's how that works. And you can also, remember, change the sizes and the shapes and the colors. You could do the same tree if it was behind something, make it real gray like it's in a mist. It doesn't have to just be in these green tones, okay, to make that work properly. Okay, now the next step is to go over to our third panel, and we're going to learn to paint rocks. Now, rocks are an incredible adventure because whenever you paint rocks, you know, it opens up the opportunity for you to use a lot of different strokes, a lot of different values, and all kinds of things that create interest in your painting. And in fact, I'll tell you what, whenever I'm teaching a seminar or a workshop, I make all my students paint rocks, even if they don't like rocks, and most people don't like to because they seem to be difficult. But I want to show you a technique today that's very unique in that it's not as hard as you think if you just be loose and free. Now, the way this works is, go down to our palette here, and we'll take our number 6 or number 8. In this case, I'm going to use the number 8 bristle brush, and I'm going to just blob on a few blobs of paint. Now, watch how this works. For instance, down here on the palette, I've got the sienna, the blue, the purple, and the umber. Okay, now here's the way this will work. Now you just load your brush with all 4 of those, and then you come up here to your canvas, and you just blob like this. Got a little too much water in there. Now most of us are good blobbers, so you won't have any problem doing this part. Just blob on the colors. Now see, I may just use pure burnt sienna in a 1 or 2. May just come up with some blue and throw in up here. Now see, the secret to this is to just put this on loose and free so that you create little shapes and dark and light areas so that you can sort of pivot from those, use those as your guide to create the rock. See, so watch this. Really exciting. Now, maybe a little purple. Okay. Then we start highlighting. Now, this is where you make or break the rock. This part is just blobbing on paint, leaving it alone. Now you're going to actually start forming the rock. I'm going to switch to my number 6 bristle brush, which will give me just a little bit more control. And we're going to use a combination of color. Now, since we have an orangish background, I think we'll use white and yellow more or less for our highlight. Now, you can throw a touch of orange in there if you want, but I always start with, like, got too much orange in there. Take the white and the yellow, and then I'm going to tone that down because we don't want a bright highlight yet. Remember when we just did the tree, we had 3 layers. We had the dark value, the middle value, and the light value. So now I'm just going to take the yellow and I'm going to add just maybe a little touch of mud to it, which could be a touch of purple, touch of sienna, touch of brown, any of the colors to kind of dull that before we start highlighting. Then we come up here, and let's just start with this big one, just to kind of get off on the right foot. Now watch this. Now you've got to put this on and then kind of gently blend back into the main body of the rock. Now see, out of one blob we may make several rocks, like here's one right here maybe. You look for areas where that looks kind of like the shape of a rock coming out, and then you go in there and you highlight, and then we'll come back and put the darks behind it, and you'll be amazed. Like for instance this one up here. All right, let's go ahead and kind of block this one in. And then I'll show you how we put a little grass around it here. Here's one that could be a long slab of a rock. See, I'm kind of gently blending the colors back. Now see here, for instance, I got to go back in now and put some more darks behind. So we go back with, say, sienna or blue or whatever color you feel is necessary, and you come back now and you begin developing the back side of the rocks. This is a very simple process, folks. I'm not sure what causes so much confusion, but it's the human mind. Sometimes we become so intellectual and thinking we can figure things out. That's what gets in the mind. If you just learn to be free with your painting like this. Yeah, I come back with the darks. Then you come back with your lights again. And you kind of go back and forth a couple of times until you get your forms. Like now I want to shape this one a little bit differently, a little bit more form to it. And see, I leave little pockets of light and dark that make it have interest. Then we come back up to this one. Notice how everything is a quick stroke. Everything is very, very quick. And kind of highlight that. See, I dry brush down, blending it very subtly back into the rock. This one. Then we'll come over here and okay, now look, what do you do with a mess like this? Well, here's what you do. You just look for a rock that might possibly be floating around in there. And like this one right here could be another long one like this one over here. Just kind of highlight the top of it, dry brush the front and down, come around like so. And there's that rock that's found, and here's another one here. Little one inside there. See, you can make lots of rocks out of just a few blobs. See, after you kind of just basically found the rock, that's all you're doing. Then you come back and you start back with the darks again, like we did on these. Rinse my brush. And I'm going to take a little bit of blue and burnt sienna. Now I'll come back on the back side here. Make that a little darker. Down in the pockets where the rocks touch each other and overlap each other, you're going to have lots of this shadowed color so that it looks contrasted. Now you pull this in there. And then you can take your brush and kind of dab it. See, and that creates little, almost like little cracks and crevices and things like that. I'm going to make a different kind of rock out of this one. Okay, and then you can just keep coming back and forth with your darks and lights until you have all of your rocks in place. And then you can, if you were in a real painting, so to speak, where you had, grass and stuff, which I'm going to show you a little bit about that, then whatever part's left showing, then you just highlight the top part. So now we just take a little bit of grass, like with our number 10 brush. I'm going to take a little green, a little sienna, a little purple, and I'm going to just dry brush some grass up, turning my brush sideways like this. This will kind of help settle the grass, the rocks down so that they're not just floating in the air. So you just kind of scrub up grass. Now on the other panel over here, I'm going to show you how to make just like a meadow of grass. Really some wonderful techniques for doing that. See, we'll just play like this, a little hillside here. So we pull the grass up here, and we got a rock right there. We put the grass there. And then all of a sudden, watch these rocks just appear out of the grass. Really neat how paintings just, it's like magic. They just appear. Things just appear out of nowhere, it seems like. Then you take some brighter color grass if you want to, maybe a little phthalo yellow green, and you just go ahead and put a few highlighted grasses in there that will contrast against the rocks. And see, this helps to settle the rocks down so they don't just stand out like a sore thumb. Everything blends in now. Then what's showing on the rock, whatever's left, see this, the tops of these rocks, then you come in and you take a smaller brush, like in this case, I'll probably go to my little number 4 sable. And then I put the brighter highlights on, so I would maybe use a little white and touch of orange or even a little yellow. Just get a clean light, and you find the rocks. Let's start down here with this little one, for instance, and I put a clean light like this. And I kind of soften the edge with my finger. And there, you see, the sun's coming down and hitting the top of that rock, and then here's the bigger rock. And you don't highlight each and every rock completely over, because every time you put a new highlight on, if you completely paint over what you had underneath, you never get your third dimension. And that's where so many of us make our mistakes. I see, like here, I'm going to highlight just this little top. See how I'm just developing the highlights and kind of cleaning the rocks up. That's all you have to do there. That's just so much fun. Now, get this one. So this kind of helps some of you understand a little bit more about the rock process and what you have to do to suggest rocks and give them a little character and why they're not so scary after all. Rocks are not that big of a problem. See, everything's done with a loose, free stroke. Now, I have to say, up close, when you look at these, they look pretty sloppy and messy, but when you stand back, you have the character of a rock. And then when you put everything in around them, like the grasses and the weeds and the flowers, you're doing really well. Now, when you use your little script brush to finally come in there, see, and put the little weeds like this, that also adds a little character to the painting and makes everything just fall right into place. I just put a few little weeds in here by using my script brush, and it just adds all the interest to the painting and settles everything down. And you can use light-colored ones and darker ones, and that's how you kind of finish a rock formation. Isn't that exciting? Now we're going to go over to the other side here in just a second, and we're going to do a grassy hillside. Now, the reason I'm going to do that is because a lot of people really struggle with grass, knowing how to get it to look soft and fluffy. Well, I'm going to show you a technique that some of you have seen before, maybe not quite like this. All right, now, see, I got those little weeds, and see how everything looks finished out there? That's a lot of fun. So practice that, having the sun coming from different directions, this direction and in this direction, and I guarantee you you'll end up with a real good handle on rocks for your next finished painting. Now, over here, I'm going to have a little hillside. And all I'm going to do is just put a little color there just to show you where I'm going to end it, coming across like this. This will all be like a meadow. Now, very important if you pay real close attention to how I'm going to do this. I'm going to take my bigger brush now. This is my number 12 bristle brush. A number 10 would be okay. I just like this number 12. All right, now this is critical. Now watch this. This is scary. But it's easy once you get past the fear. Okay, now notice down here on the palette, I want blobs of paint. See how thick that is? Okay, now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this on real thick and blobby. Now I'm going to move fast, so pay attention here. You put that on very thick. Then you throw in a little green, a little burnt sienna. And you put that in. Maybe a little purple, a little blue, a little sienna again, a little green. Just kind of scatter. See how much fun that is? Boy, this is really good if you're nervous. Man, you can just cure all kinds of problems. Just throw it in, maybe throw a little orange in there. Then we go back to some darker colors, back to the green down in the corner here. Touch more yellow. But see how thick it is and how loose and free that is? Now you're going to look at that and you're probably about ready to turn off your TV thinking you got this tape and that's all you're learning. Well, watch this. A little more darkness down here in the corner. Now see how thick it is, but you don't have time to waste. So wipe your brush, get it good and dry. Get all of it sucked out there, that moisture. Start at the top, put your brush completely flat. Now watch this. This is very exciting. No, this is not a wheat field. This is just grass. Plain grass. Now watch how we pull this up. Now you don't want to create rows, so you go back and you kind of pat it. And when you hear, see, the dark pulls up. Down here at the bottom, pull that up, pat that in until you start creating these nice little pockets of light and dark. And over here now I'm going to come up to I'm going to raise it up a little bit. So see what I did? That's good. Take a little yellow and you work this in because you want to create a little bit more of an interest over here. Up like this, like maybe a little bush. Just pat it right in like this until you create a nice, soft background just by patting and pulling back. Now, I want them to close in if they would. This is just, they are, it looks good. See how soft and subtle and beautiful that is? That's because I didn't spend a lot of time piddling, playing, or puttering, and that's what most of us have a tendency to do. Now, you can also add a little brighter color if you want to. Like, say you want to come up here and make this bush a little higher. It could have been a darker bush. You can just push like this. But this grass is so soft, it's so subtle, it's just beautiful. Now, when that dries, you can come back in with techniques like we used up on our tree up here to create these little highlights like flowers and just ground clutter, cover, or whatever you want to call it, like even over here around these rocks. I could take this color right now and just kind of dab little highlights See around the edges of the rock formations and things like that. This is just so incredible. Just softens everything. If I could say anything that's really important for an artist, learning how to soften your painting, all edges. I don't care if it's a cloud, a mountain, a rock, with the exception probably of your tree limbs and a few odds and ends. You want very subtle edges. Yeah, you can still see the edge, but it's subtle. It's not real harsh, okay? Now, out of this can be born all kinds of things. For instance, see this little bush right here? I'm going to just simply take my brush and rinse it out real good. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a flowering technique, which is really a lot of fun. And we'll sort of mix up a little color. And I think in this case I'll take a little white. And I'll take a little orange. I'm not a big orange fan, but I kind of like the salmon colored you get if you add a little white to it. It makes it real pretty and soft. And it looks good sometimes when you're accenting with something with a lot of green in it. Now remember when we did the tree, how we dabbed the brush straight on? Well, you do a similar thing down here. You just dab straight on, and you kind of create. Now this is what we're going to do, this little pocket right here. By the way, you could just leave this and not mess with it if you just want a simple grassy hillside. But if you want to learn to put a little color in there, you do it like this. And I'm taking this little dark pocket here, and I'm going to put some of these little pink colored flowers or highlights, whatever you want to call it, just down in this corner, and that kind of creates a little bushy section. And then you wipe your brush, reload, and you continue. You're creating some nice little pockets of light and dark and highlights. See how you had that nice, excuse me, that nice little touch of light and dark. Then, of course, kind of like we did over there with the rocks, if you take your little script brush and just a little bit of the green, and you can just throw in some nice little weeds and things, just a few little delicate weeds that kind of create a little interest. They don't have to be big, they don't have to be real heavy, just the sort of a finishing touch, if you will. Now, this color that we've got on here can vary. It could be blues and mauves. It can be an array of different colors, okay? There's just no worry at all to it. Just whatever color suits you. As long as you get this nice grassy background, this greenish color, why, then all you have to do is put whatever you want to, because anything will complement it. Anything from this peach to a red to a yellow to a gold, and then you'll have it made. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little segmentation, or these little segments of paintings. And I'm going to just kind of reiterate how important it is if you're a beginner and you're learning, for the first time and you haven't had a lot of experience. Take the time to do your studies like this, because it will teach you better than getting into a painting that causes you a lot of problems and you get frustrated and want to quit. To see here, yeah, I'm not totally happy with any of this. You won't be either. I just wanted to do it so I could learn from it, and it cuts way, way down on your frustration, okay? Well, I hope to see some of you sometime in a workshop or an art class sometime. Hope you get to keep painting, so God bless you. Stay inspired, and I'll see you again here real soon on another Yarnell School of Fine Art.
For tapes or information, call us at 1-877-4-YARNELL or on the internet, www.yarnellart.com, or write us at Yarnell Studio, Post Office Box 808, Skiatook, Oklahoma, 74070.